Please welcome Dr. Davidicus Wong.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me in the back? Sounds a thing? Awesome, great. Well, I've had a story. I thought we were at the Seagull School of Business, but I was 3 blocks away when I was supposed to be doing the 7 check, so that checks out. So wonderful to see your beautiful faces here. And this is a talk to thank you for all you've done during the pandemic for all the patients we look after. And to just support you and remind you that you are a healthcare superhero. So, thank you. And of course, like all superheroes, we have our origin stories. So when we've been stressed throughout the pandemic and stressed in our everyday life, it's really important to remember why we're here. I'll just briefly share my origin story. So I was unfortunate enough to have rheumatoid arthritis when I was a kid, diagnosed at age 8. And at age 11 in grade 6, I was in the hospital for a big flare, which it probably felt like COVID at the time. Opioid ache, fever, rashes. And I was in Burnaby Hospital for 2 weeks. Scary time. I didn't really know what was going on, but I was really moved and touched by the care of the nurses and the doctors and all the allied healthcare providers. And they treated the little kid that was scared, and they didn't treat disease. So I knew one day if I studied hard, I wanted to do a job just like that. Could have been a nurse or a doctor, but I could see who was working a lot harder, so I chose the easier job. And I wanted to be the kind of healthcare provider that sees the whole person. And that's how I fell in love with family practice. I trained in the olden days when there was a rotating internship instead of straight into residency. So I interned in Victoria with people that wanted to become general surgeons, pediatricians, internist cardiologists. We had the same training, and then after that year and a half, we can go out and do locums, trial family practice, and then apply for any residency you want. I was thinking of psychiatry for pediatrics. But when I started doing locums, I was really entranced by my patient stories. And I realized more at that time in the regular family practice covering for doctors on holidays, the special relationship between that family doctor, that healthcare provider, and every patient, the way they talked about their doctor when he was away, or she was away. And also their sharing of the stories that we weren't treating diseases, we were treating human beings. So I learned that family practice, gerontology, the specialties that don't focus on one particular problem. We treat the whole individual in the context of their family and their lives, and we don't treat according to just guidelines and protocols. But we only see disease in the context of that whole person's goals and times. And I know every one of you does that. And I thank you for all you've been doing. And I'd like you to reflect on your origin story, whatever you're stressed, and I want you to share that with your colleagues and support them in it. So today I hope to provide some practical advice, but many of you have helped your patients manage stress and are experts on managing stress yourself. But just a reminder, and to remind you, as a superhero, you do have a secret superpower, I'll remind you. So I'll recognize the effects of stress in our lives. You're probably well aware of them. And I'll provide a practical approach to managing stress. And I hope you get a better understanding of how our brain works, including concepts like metacognition, one of your superpowers I'll elaborate on. Cognitive biases, that's one of our weaknesses or vulnerabilities like Superman and Kryptonite, and neuroplasticity, one of your superpowers as well. And we'll talk about 3 mental health skills that I use every day and I approach my patients on, encourage my colleagues to practice. Those are mindfulness, cognitive therapy, and self-hypnosis or positive visualization. So, full disclosure, I don't have any conflicts of interest. I'm not being paid for any drug company for any stress-relieving drug or antidepressants. My intention is for you to achieve your positive potential in life. And I have 188 biases just like you are, because our brain works, at least the left side of the brain. All of the little ways that our brain gets tricked and we fall into thinking traps. and I'll elaborate on that. So, your brain is a thought factory. Even though I'm giving the lecture, you're coming up with all kinds of ideas, images, and things that are popping into your head. We're constantly processing information at Ireland and processing our memories and making plans, both on a conscious and subconscious level. Some of those thoughts that are popping in your head are true, and some of them are not so true or accurate. But the thoughts we focus on, or upon which we ruminate, shape our emotions, our perspectives, and our behavior. They contribute to the stress as well. And we have this negativity bias. Any of you who are married know this every day. So we focus on the negative. And this is a survival technique. This is how the left side of the brain works. This is how we detect danger, that something's wrong. The problem is that when you're married, you say out loud what's wrong. And our brains are tuned in to hear those negative comments or the negative stimuli. We actually have to come up or think of 5 positive things to balance one negative thing. So as soon as you go home, if you're going to say some constructive feedback to your child or your partner, come up with 5 compliments first. It might be so hard that you'll probably not bother saying the positive, the feedback you're going to provide to start with. But it's also important that when you're thinking something negative, do your best to come up with 5 things that you're thankful for, or 5 things that are really good. And if you look around, there's a lot more positive than good, especially when we wake up in the morning. Emotions are part of being human. They've helped us to survive. If we didn't have desire, you wouldn't be here because your mom and dad wouldn't have gotten together, like Back to the Future. Without sadness, we wouldn't avoid the things that cause us pain. And if we didn't get angry, we wouldn't defend ourselves and our loved ones and things that we believe in. And if we didn't have anxiety, we'd fall asleep, we'd never plan ahead, we wouldn't wake up in the morning, and we'd ignore the fire alarm, which most people do in medical clinics. And those emotions, though, because of the structure of our brain, because we're mammals, the limbic brain, the midbrain, can hijack our thinking. So when we're angry, we think like a 2-year-old or 3-year-old and say things and do things we don't mean. Hence plane rage or driving rage. When we're sad, we tend to look more at the negative. We think negatively about ourselves, our future, and our situation. And when we're anxious, we underestimate our abilities to manage and we overestimate the challenges. And we have a certain system that we fall into, and I hope none of you are falling into it at the moment. This is daydreaming mode, the default mode network. So we're not doing a particular task or being mindful. We fall into this daydreaming mode where we're reflecting and creating a very narrowed sense of self and creating a story semi-consciously. But we have a remarkable ability to adapt. So all these things that sound like liabilities have been an advantage for human survival. We can learn new ways of thinking and therefore feeling, and we can create new habits of thought, feeling, and being. It was actually Donald Hebb, a Canadian neuroscientist in the 1950s, that coined the term neuroplasticity. And he found that structurally, the connections between neurons that are firing together, like repeated thoughts, repeated actions, how we're learning things, actually changes the structures of the nerves so that the networks fire more efficiently. The neurons actually grow new dendrites and axons and just continue to fire almost automatically if we practice repeatedly. So even though neuroplasticity is relatively new to the lay public, this has been around for many decades, half a century. So it's almost as if we can hardwire new habits of thought, feeling, and intention. Another principle is attention density. So what we focus on, we magnify through the same neuroplasticity. So if we concentrate and repeat things over and over again, this solidifies new habits, thoughts, feelings, and intentions. So what have we learned? We tend to focus more on the negative.
our emotions can take over our thinking, and repetitive self-defeating thoughts can perpetuate negative emotions in a perpetual vicious cycle. But the same principles tell us that we can use the right prefrontal cortex, your thinking mind, with mindfulness, cognitive therapy, and positive visualization, focusing on positive perspectives and emotional states, and we can strengthen them with repetition and reinforcement. And our new self-affirming positive practices can become hardwired with repetitive practice. And this will help us deal with the stress that is part of our calling. So the superpower you may not have realized you have is metacognition. That's the ability to recognize your own thoughts, beliefs, and emotions and transform them. So far, ChatGPT AI has not been able to do this. So as we'll learn the habits of thought, belief, and action of the left brain, that judging, comparing mind, can be transformed from the perspective of that right brain that's more in line with the ideas of mindfulness, love, unconditional compassion, and peace and equanimity. So, easy tips on managing stress, things you probably already know. The ideal would be flow, when the challenge of our work perfectly matches our abilities and the number of nurses and doctors on staff. So it doesn't always happen, but when it happens, it's magical. Because when we're in flow, you can imagine a time when you're doing your favorite activity or sport, be it skiing or cycling or swimming, or doing a craft or playing music, and time just flies by, you forget about yourself, and you feel totally at peace and ease. That would be ideal if that was our work every day. If you had a job, probably in your previous job before you finished school, where the job was way too easy and you could do much more and you had too much time, you're probably bored. When that challenge of our work, because of time and resources and our abilities, outweighs our abilities to manage, then we start feeling stressed and anxious. And as I mentioned, when you're feeling stressed and anxious, that limbic part of our brains kind of take hold, and we further underestimate our abilities. We start to feel helpless. And over time, if there's no improvement or hope of improvement, we start feeling hopeless and start feeling depressed and burnt out. So we want to put an end to that. A key factor is called locus of control, and that's your sense of empowerment. So if you feel you have no ability to change your conditions, that makes you feel much worse, more depressed, and more helpless. But we have to learn to accept the things we can't change, but recognize our responsibility to change the things we can. So we should work together to improve conditions so we can still provide excellent patient care. So we should lobby with our groups to make sure that nursing numbers, the patients, and the resources are that we support one another and that the system supports us as well. But in the meantime, we have to say the serenity prayer and live it. So grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. But the one key is to know what you can change. So Hans Selye, who came out with the stress response, talked about two types of stress: distress, which is what we're talking about, but also eustress. So that's actually the good stress, the good sides of stress. So to recognize in some circumstances, stress is good for us. Kelly McGonigal, in her recent book, The Upside of Stress, said that in addition to the fight or flight response that we're familiar with, that raises our blood pressure, makes us feel panicky, makes us feel overwhelmed, there's also the challenge response or mindset. So it can build our confidence knowing that we can manage a challenge. And there's the tend and befriend response, knowing that we can connect with other people who are in the same boat, which is all of us, that we can support one another and bring us together. And also the other keys of managing stress are things we all know, but we have to remind ourselves. So every one of us has to be a good parent to ourselves. So number one, these are all the things you tell your kid: go out and play. So have a regular exercise routine. So my go-to exercise is swimming. So No matter how much sleep I got, or if I'm on call or a patient in labor, I'll still go for my swim every day. Although I get the lifeguard to hold my pager in case I have to go to the hospital. So that's a real key. And if you don't schedule your exercise, then it's not going to happen because you're going to be too busy and won't have energy. Don't skip your meals. So schedule regular healthy meals. Your breaks are really important. And go to bed. Get enough sleep and take regular breaks. So I have to admit, because some of my slides came in at 1 a.m. last night, because I'm always updating things. So I'm a little sleep deprived, but I'll be catching up. And of course, go to the doctor. See your own family doctor appropriately, particularly if you are feeling down or overwhelmed with work. That's what we deal with. So that's part of health, emotional well-being. And a real key is to have your own support group. So express your emotions with those maybe colleagues or friends that are non-medical, so that you have the freedom to express how you really feel. And good friends will reflect back and give you other ideas and perspectives and give you the empathy that you need. So I meet up every couple of months with 2 colleagues. One's a family doctor I've known since we graduated, and another is a general surgeon at our hospital. And at Tim Hortons, and our Tim Hortons Day on a Saturday, everything that we say at Tim Hortons stays at Tim Hortons. We talk about wives, about our kids, about patients, about colleagues, and we give a good perspective to one another and different ideas. And of course, live in accord with your values. So happiness is when what you think and what you say and what you do are in harmony. And so crucial to attend to our relationships, because that's really what life is all about. And if you don't schedule time for the most important people in your life, your work and all your responsibilities will take over. So it's so important to spend time with them every day. And remember that negativity bias. Make sure that you overemphasize how much you care and love them. So for them to thrive, you have to dedicate the time and commit the time and the effort, because every life story is really a love story. Next Wednesday will be the 20th anniversary that my mom passed away, really suddenly. And I was devastated because she was my model for unconditional love. Her circle of love expanded beyond our family to our church community, to the whole community. And she just exuded care and thoughtfulness. She's the most thoughtful person I know. She kind of spoiled me because I find everyone else I deal with at work is so thoughtless. But I realize we all have our own stories and have different priorities. But I came to terms with my mom's passing when I thought and reflected back all the love that she gave me. And I realized that we're part of the love cycle. I was looking at the schedule. The talks are very short. And I realized that's because we're all getting older and we're part of the water cycle and we need to take bio breaks. So we know that 60% of our body is water, but we don't keep it. We're going to take it in, we're going to let it out. It becomes precipitation. It's going to snow and Whistler and rain over here. And then we consume it again. And likewise with love. Every one of you has received love from so many people, coaches and teachers and best friends from our past, grandparents, uncles and aunts, and your parents. We love each other in so many human and perfect ways. And then we learn to accept that love, to love ourselves and to send that love forward. So I realized my mom's legacy is the love she gave me. And I can best be a tribute to her by sending that love forward to my patients, my colleagues like you, to my children, and so that they can love other people. And so that legacy never dies. And that's one part of us that never dies. And every life story is therefore a love story. So the second key emotional health skill would be mindfulness. So I use it every day, throughout the day, and attempt to do it every moment to center my mind. It's like a GPS that doesn't deviate and remind you of where you really intend to be and where to go. And it calms the nervous system. It helps look at with compassion those cognitive distortions that pop up, those negative thoughts, and kindly helps you to reevaluate them from a loving perspective. I found over the past 30 years with the practice of mindfulness, it's really transformed me so that I'm less reactive. I used to be very anxious and nervous. I would never talk in front of a big group. I wouldn't even want to put my hand up in a small group in medical school. But mindfulness helped me to take that perspective and not think about that little self so much. And the ultimate test is when I bought this really expensive Sony big screen TV. We set it up and I was moving the old TV, which was off balance and really heavy, and struck the new TV. And as my excited little kids were watching the TV, they saw this flash of lightning across the new big screen TV as it died. And in the olden days, I might have thought of a four-letter word, but they saw their dad be calm and accept and realize things will happen. We only use one four-letter word in our office, one four-letter F word when we're frustrated with some change, for example, with the electronic medical record. And it's flux, F-L-U-X. So next time you're frustrated with the computer at the hospital not working, you can say flux. Everything is constantly changing, even us. And that's one of the lessons of mindfulness, that there's nothing permanent to cling to. So mindfulness is actually evidence-based. John Kabat-Zinn brought it to the Harvard Medical School, created the mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's evidence-based for improving chronic pain, acute pain, cancer pain, stress, depression, anxiety. So it's a mainstay of psychology today. But as defined by John Kabat-Zinn, mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, and without judgment. And ultimately, we might get some new self-understanding and wisdom. So people often think it's just eating a raisin and paying attention to it, or just breathing all by itself. But we learn everything, our thoughts, feelings, sensations as objects of our attention. And we learn to accept them without judgment and identification. Not that easy to do because we normally identify with our feelings. I'm angry, I'm sad, or we identify with our ideas or our beliefs. As you know, if you've ever talked to anyone about masks or COVID vaccinations. So we have a lot of identity tied in with our thoughts. So in mindfulness, we learn not to be carried away with our thoughts, or we recognize when we are, and we gently bring ourselves back. And we recognize that a lot of our suffering comes from our pushing away of things that are unpleasant and clinging to things that are pleasant. And one of our goals is equanimity, to accept things as they arise, recognize the things we can't change, while still recognize the positive effect you can do with a heart of compassion, unconditional love for others. It makes us much happier. So I kind of created a formula when I'm teaching patients about how to integrate that mindful attitude into their daily lives to stay on course. So number one, of course, is the daily meditation practice. And I think we have enough time to do a little mindfulness exercise. So I invite you to close your eyes and just focus on the sensations of your breath. So don't try to breathe fast or slow, but just notice the sensations wherever you might feel them in your body as you breathe in and as you breathe out. And if your mind wanders or you're thinking of other sensations or thoughts, bring your thoughts back to the anchor of your breath. Now turn your attention to sound. Sounds you hear immediately around you, or sounds in the distance, and just let those sounds arise without you needing to label them, but just notice the constantly changing soundscape. And if your thoughts wander from the sound, return your attention to the anchor of sound. Now I invite you just to turn your attention to sensations, perhaps in your hands or fingers, maybe tingling or warmth or coolness, and just note them. Now I invite you to reorient and open your eyes. And that was just a brief 3 minutes in mindfulness. You'll notice at first you'll get other things that are distracting and thoughts and feelings, but with practice, you notice that it slows you down and reminds you what it feels like to be alive. But for more practice, people usually will start 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, and I'd suggest guided meditations that are on some podcasts that I'll show in the next few slides. But in addition to that, taking daily 1 or 2 minute mindful breaks was shown by the University of California in Berkeley in their microdosing mindfulness experiment to be just as effective as meditating for an hour every day. So when you eat, when you take your break, and when you go to the washroom, that's an excellent opportunity to take a microdose of mindfulness. If you're in an office or in a clinic, you might be able to look out the window and just notice the motion of traffic, of leaves rustling in the wind. Just noticing motion for 30 seconds or a minute can bring you to that centered, mindful, in the moment state of just observing. Or you might ponder of where you are in the world and the universe. Or make eye contact with someone else in a non-creepy way. Or see your office, hospital, or clinic as a museum and just really look at an object, what it feels like, the color, the light for 30 seconds. Or if you're lucky to be working from home, you can connect with your pet. This is my little Labradoodle Teddy, who accompanies on many Zoom calls. So consider the microdosing mindfulness, and there's microdosingmindfulness.com to get more elaborate suggestions and some practice. I also use those breaks to reflect on what we call the 4 divine abodes, but they happen to be wonderful mindsets and perspectives from the right side of the brain that helps us look with compassion, equanimity, and with joy the negative thoughts that pop up from the left side of the brain. So they're peace or equanimity, joy, compassion, and love. So classically, people will just recite these meditations, these words, such as for equanimity, breathing in, I calm my body, breathing out, I calm my mind. May I be balanced, may I be at peace. And may I learn to see the arising and passing of all things with equanimity and balance. May I be open and balanced and peaceful. So people will do that for 5 minutes or 10 minutes if they can, just to recenter again. And again, there's reflections on joy, compassion. May you be held in compassion. May your pain and sorrow be eased. May you be at ease. This is a wonderful reflection when we think about our patients or colleagues, or even someone that you've had a disagreement with. It actually transforms how we feel. And my favorite is the loving kindness meditation or unconditional love. So metta, not Facebook, metta with 2 T's, is the term for unconditional love. So this is my brief metta meditation. May you be happy and healthy, peaceful and safe. So a little exercise we can all do and practice is picture in front of you someone that you love unconditionally. It could be your partner, It could be a child that's in your life. See them in front of you and say the words, may you be happy and healthy, peaceful and safe. And that just comes naturally and easily because you already feel it. The next step of the exercise is to visualize someone that you feel kind of neutral with. Maybe someone you see every day, or the barista at Starbucks that you haven't really have a relationship with, you feel kind of neutral. If you think these words and see their face 5 minutes every day, it will actually transform how you feel towards that person as well. And the ultimate test is to imagine someone that you might actually have a little antipathy towards, or Donald Trump. And then imagine him and then wish him, may you be happy and healthy, peaceful and safe. That's the graduation exercise. Another useful exercise is just imagine the person beside you. You don't have to look at them or talk to them, but remember that this person was once a baby held in the arms of his or her parents. That this person was once a toddler, learning new things and stumbling and falling and having fun and giggling. That this person was a child with big dreams, but also frustrations and tears. And this person has their share of heartache and sorrow. And this person just wants to be happy, just like you. So when we imagine another person living these same emotions, but in with their own separate story, that we all really want to be happy. We just have different ideas about how we go about doing that. And then, as I mentioned, some daily podcasts kind of gets you into the mode of knowing how mindfulness applies to everyday life and how it can transform how we're dealing with the stress of lives and how we interact with one another and deal with the transitions of life. So I like Jack Kornfield or Tara Brach. So they're on the free podcast that you can download, and Joseph Goldstein. And all these mindfulness teachers are also great authors. And I also recommend books by Thich Nhat Hanh, John Kabat-Zinn, and Rick Hanson, the psychologist, not the man in motion. Although he's probably written some good books too. And also welcome the wait. So anytime you're thinking of pulling out your phone and checking for messages or social media, that's a perfect time to instead be mindful. Connect with the people around you if it's appropriate, or reflect on one of those 4 divine abodes: compassion, love, equanimity, and joy. And I tend to see a strong emotion and a startling situation, something that seizes my emotions or thoughts or attention as a meditation bell, a perfect opportunity to recenter. So Thich Nhat Hanh, when he was alive, practiced in Plum Village, where Christians and Buddhists and people of all beliefs would meditate together. And no matter what people were doing, when the meditation bell was sounded, everyone, whether they be gardening or cooking or eating or napping, would stop what they're doing and reflect on, what am I thinking, doing, and feeling? So strong emotions for me are a meditation bell to reflect and to reground with mindfulness. RAIN is an acronym commonly used in mindfulness. Recognize what I'm feeling, thinking, or experiencing. Accept them without judgment. Investigate and possibly choose an alternative thought if what we're thinking doesn't match with who we really are. And then nurture with compassion and unconditional love. So think of your whole consciousness and awareness as the sky, and our thoughts and feelings as clouds. Often when we're caught in a cloud, we think that's all that is, and we think that's all who we are. But mindfulness shifts us to the right side of the brain to add that compassionate reflection, that big view of what's going on. And frame each day with these thoughtful mindsets of gratitude and connect with your deepest values. And really, the ultimate goal of mindfulness is awakening. So I was just in Japan, and this is a photo of a 28-meter tall bronze Buddha. So the Buddha awakened, and when he was walking down the street, people asked him, who are you? What kind of being are you? Are you human? And he said, no, I am not. Are you a god? He said, no, I am not. And they said, what? Then what are you? And he said, I am awakened. So we awaken from the trance of conventional consciousness, the conceptual way of perceiving our experiences, because that's the go-to side is that left cognitive way of thinking of things. In fact, John Teasdale's new book, What Happens in Mindfulness, elaborates on the interacting cognitive subsystem. So his theory, he has evidence that we have two ways of knowing the world. We've actually been talking about this all the time, but he's actually brought it out as this theory that we have one way of knowing through our judging mind, the conceptual cognitive subsystem, that dualistic way of thinking that the Buddha was talking about, and is balanced by the intuitive holistic system of the right side of the brain that we're nurturing with mindfulness. So that conceptual mind is a world of ideas, and that's what we are working on all the time when we're looking after our patients. But it's balanced by that holistic, intuitive side of the right cerebral hemisphere. And it brings compassion to our work and compassion to ourselves. Some of you might be familiar with neuroscientist Jill Bolte Taylor, who's about 20 years old. She wrote Stroke of Insight. She had a stroke that wiped out or took offline the left side of her brain. So she lost her sense of that little self, her identity, and that problem-solving scientist self. And she was totally immersed in the right brain. And it was an incredible experience with flow, sense of connection, and a greater self. And eventually, like 20 years later, she wrote this book last year called Whole Brain Living. So she sees the left brain as our persona, as Carl Jung called it. That's linear, judgment-based, structural, compares, contrasts, and sees ourselves as separate from the rest of the world. And attached to that is that shadow that Carl Jung called our darker emotions, our anxiety, our stress, our panic, and how we seek happiness on external things like cars or food or wonderful experiences. And the right side of the brain that we're nurturing with mindfulness is present moment focused, connected with flow, joy, and gratitude, exactly as the Buddha was teaching with the 4 divine abodes. And Carl Jung called our true self is that greater self that's connected with all beings and with all life. So take a look at that book. It gives you that perspective that we need a dialogue between the two cerebral hemispheres to thrive and to survive. So that left hemisphere comes from the perspective of the individual separate self. It keeps you safe. And that right side connects us together, helps us work together and get along. So the second cognitive skill for managing stress is managing our thoughts because they shape our feelings. I'll briefly take you through a few cognitive biases that affect your thinking. One is overgeneralizing, making broad assumptions based on the facts at hand, such as you can't trust anyone. And with mindfulness, we can remember that other people are individuals just like us. Polarizing is all or nothing, black and white thinking, that our brains like to simplify things. Pandemic is a disaster and there's nothing good in this situation, but we balance that by knowing the challenge has brought a lot of good and kindness out of one another, and all of you have risen to the occasion. Personalizing is taking things too personally when they're not meant to be personal, that thinking someone deliberately did something to hurt you, but recognizing maybe they had a bad day and you can just let it go. And catastrophizing makes you believe the worst thing is going to happen, and so common in anxiety and depression. So we need more balanced thought, that you know how to stay well, you know where to get help. You're not going to get burnt out. And we all tend to disqualify the positive. That's the other side of the negativity bias. So with your thoughts, ask yourself, is this thought true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? And another perspective is reflect on that thought. What would your best friend tell you if they knew you were thinking this way? So there's some wonderful books, self-help books on cognitive therapy, Feeling Good, the New Mood Therapy, Mind Over Mood, very commonly found in libraries and bookstores. your family doctor can refer you to Bounce Back, which is a phone coaching program with book materials on CBT. And there's an online program that your family doctor can refer you to if you're suffering from a bit of stress and depression, but not greatly depressed or severely anxious. The CBT Skills Group teaches you mindfulness and CBT skills with groups on Zoom over a course of 6 sessions. So your family doc can refer you to these resources as well. And then finally, the last emotional health skill is visualizing. You're all familiar with the thesaurus. Roget created a thesaurus of synonyms and antonyms, but you probably didn't know that he did that because he was feeling depressed. Roget was a physician. He lost a number of friends through death, and he wanted to feel better. So he wanted to come up with words that meant the opposite of loneliness, isolation, and grief. So he came out with joy, connection, and love. So I always ask my patients after they give me the list of 5 problems to tell me what their goal is, to turn it around, because we have to set our sight on something better, to solve those problems, but create a goal. So most of you might think of hypnosis as sleep or someone controlling you, but it's actually a natural process our brain falls into. It involves focusing your attention, tuning out the immediate environment, and tuning in more deeply, focusing on particular states. They could be feelings, sensations, or ideas. And you can see that's exactly what we're doing with mindfulness. You do it when you're daydreaming, when you're reliving past trauma. During a medical emergency, our patients are already in a trance. What we say and do has a significant impact in a positive or negative way. You're in a trance when you're watching a movie, when you're caught up with the characters and the action, and awaken when you come out of the theater, or when you're reading a novel in the newspaper and your spouse says something to you. That's why a lot of spouses get misdiagnosed with dementia or hearing problems. So you are already in a trance. The default mode network in the brain that creates this false sense of identity, this narrow self, and that conceptual cognitive system that's always thinking and judging with its cognitive biases creates a very narrow sense of self. So we are already in this little trance of our individual selves. And with mindfulness and self-hypnosis, we can kind of emphasize our sense of connection with others to open up and create new stories and new mental models and a new identity. And in our small self, we might have limited stories, and they arise from our impressionable youth and our experiences. We have to question our core beliefs to see if they really foster positive feelings and positive actions. So we all have some of these limiting beliefs that we should challenge and recognize that's from a smaller self that the brain has created and not your real self. Thoughts like, I'm not good enough, or I'm powerless, life is unfair, or I can't trust anyone, or I have to be perfect to be loved. So with self-hypnosis and mindfulness, you can awaken from these trances that we fall into. So I'm not going to put you in a trance today, but I'm going to invite you to do self-hypnosis to kind of reflect on those divine abodes of mind, unconditional love, joy, and compassion and equanimity. So what you do is imagine yourself, you use all of your senses in a relaxed state. So I invite you to close your eyes and in your imagination, bring to mind scenes from your memory that invoke selfless, timeless joy. Moments of flow when your abilities match the challenge at hand, or perhaps communing and connecting in nature, or playing with children, or sharing laughter with old friends. Or you might bring to mind a time in nature where you experience a sense of awe. And when you're in this place of joy, of flow and awe, notice what you're feeling, hearing, and sensing. And I invite you to bring your index finger and thumb together so that if you want to strengthen this feeling with practice by visualizing a moment of awe or joy or flow, that you can strengthen it by bringing your thumb and index finger together whenever you need to, when challenged by your work, or when you just want to feel the joy of being alive. And next, to foster a sense of peace or equanimity, find yourself in a personal sanctuary of peace. Hear the sounds that bring you a sense of calm, perhaps the sounds of nature, maybe waves washing across the shore, leaves rustling in the wind, the sound of a trickling stream, or maybe the music of Bach or Pachelbel. Hear the sounds that bring you calm and feel sensations that soothe and calm your mind and body. Inhaling scents that calm your mind, and feel yourself in the presence of a person or being, real or imagined, who invokes timeless peace. And you can bring your ring finger and your thumb together and know that you can bring these feelings back and strengthen them whenever you wish by bringing your thumb and ring finger together. And then finally, to foster unconditional love, feel yourself in the presence of a person or being who accepts and loves you just as you are. And feel how wonderful it feels in your body and in your heart to be loved in this way. And let that feeling of being loved flow and grow in your heart, and realize that you are connected to the universal cycle of love, accepting the love you've received throughout your life and sending it out and expressing it in words and actions and thoughts to all living beings. And I invite you to recognize where you are right now, and knowing that you can return to these experiences whenever you choose to. And at the count of 3, I'd like you to orient to where you are. 1, or aware of where you are. 2, knowing that this is a part of your mind that you can engage at any time to deal with the stresses and difficult thoughts and feelings of life. And 3, eyes open and fully alert. So we are progressively awakening with the evolution of our life stories, our mental models, and how we see ourselves in our world. So I invite you to recognize that you indeed are evolving into your positive potential. And I thank you for being heroes throughout the pandemic and in your careers. Remember your origin story, and remember that you have this superpower, metacognition, rewriting your own story, and that you're more than you think you are, that we're connected. We're kind of like the Avengers, we're a team. So thank you very much for your kind attention, and thank you for your work.